The beginning of attention. The story begins on a quiet evening in Los Angeles. The city lights flickered like stars fallen to earth. But for Ana de Armas, none of it mattered. Her thoughts were fixed on one man, Keanu Reeves. She had admired him for years, not only for his acting but for his humility and the way he treated people with respect. There was something different about him, something almost untouchable. Yet the more she saw him at film events, charity dinners, and even casual gatherings, the more she wanted to know who he was, beyond the fame. Ana had always been confident in herself. Her talent had taken her from Cuba to Hollywood, and she was now recognized around the world. But when it came to Keanu, her confidence seemed to vanish. Every time she tried to approach him, he would smile kindly, listen politely, and then gently step back as if he were protecting a space around himself. It was not rejection in a harsh way. It was more like a quiet distance he kept from everyone. This mystery pulled her in even deeper. One night, after a charity gala, Ana found herself sitting alone by the fountain outside the venue. Her dress sparkled under the soft glow of the lamps, but her mind was restless. She replayed the moment inside when she had spoken to Keanu. She had shared a story about her childhood in Cuba, about how she had dreamed of becoming an actress. He had listened with those calm, deep eyes and then simply said, "Dreams are powerful when they are shared with kindness." His words echoed in her heart. Ana wanted to know more. She wanted to break through the quiet shield he carried. She tried different ways. Sometimes she would bring up deep conversations during group dinners, hoping he would stay longer to talk. Sometimes she would laugh a little louder or share stories that revealed her heart. Keanu always responded with gentle interest, but then he would step back again. It felt like chasing the shadow of someone standing just out of reach. This distance became her challenge. It was not about attraction alone. It was about respect, curiosity, and the strange pull of wanting to reach someone who never demanded attention but always carried it. What Ana did not know was that Keanu had reasons for his quietness. He had lived through loss, loneliness, and the heavy burden of fame. For him, distance was not coldness. It was a way to protect his heart and to keep his kindness safe from the noise of the world. Yet something about Ana was different, too. She carried her own scars, her own struggles. There was a resilience in her smile, and when she looked at him, he felt she was seeing not the star Keanu Reeves, but the man behind the screen. And that scared him more than he could admit. The first twist came during a film shoot where both were cast together. The production had arranged a long outdoor sequence, and during a late-night rehearsal, the generator powering the lights suddenly failed. The whole area fell into darkness. The crew scrambled. People shouted. But in the middle of the confusion, Ana saw Keanu walk calmly toward a frightened young assistant who had tripped near the cables. Instead of focusing on himself, he knelt down, helped the assistant up, and even offered his own jacket to keep the girl warm. Ana stood frozen. This was the side of him the world rarely saw. No cameras, no reporters, just a man who chose kindness first. Her heart raced. She realized at that moment that maybe the way to reach him was not through clever words or loud gestures, but through something much simpler, genuine care. The suspense grew as the night went on. The lights eventually returned, but Ana could not forget what she had witnessed. She felt an unspoken truth in her chest. Keanu was not a man to be impressed by glamour. He was a man who noticed the quiet acts of humanity. From that night forward, she decided her approach would change. She would not chase him with noise. Instead, she would try to meet him in the quiet spaces where kindness lived. What she did not know was that this decision would lead her down a path filled with unexpected turns, moments of heartbreak, and one shocking response from Keanu that the world would never forget. This was only the beginning. The quiet test. The days after that late-night shoot stayed in Ana's mind like a song that refused to end. She kept replaying the way Keanu had helped the assistant in the dark, how he had given his jacket without hesitation. She realized she had been trying too hard to impress him with words while he spoke a different language, the language of action and kindness. So she decided to change her approach. Instead of trying to catch his attention in loud rooms, she began to observe him quietly. During rehearsals, she noticed how he always arrived before everyone else, often carrying his own bags when assistants offered to help. He greeted the security guards with the same respect he gave to producers. When a young cameraman's hands shook while setting up equipment, Keanu placed his own hand gently over his to steady it, whispering, "Take your time." Anna felt a mixture of admiration and confusion. She wondered why a man so respected by the world would choose to live with such simplicity. Wasn't he tired of giving so much to others while keeping himself hidden? One afternoon, during a break, Anna saw him sitting under a tree near the set. He was reading a small notebook worn out at the edges. Curiosity grew inside her. She wanted to know what was written there. But instead of asking, she sat down at a distance, silently hoping he would notice. Keanu glanced up, offered a polite smile, then returned to his notebook. Anna tried to start a conversation. "Do you always carry that notebook?" He closed it gently, almost protectively, and replied, "Yes. It reminds me of the things that matter." His voice was calm, steady, but there was a weight behind the words, as if the notebook carried pieces of his soul. She wanted to ask more, but something in his eyes stopped her. It was not a wall of pride, but a wall of pain. She realized then that Keanu's quietness was not about ignoring people. It was about guarding memories too deep for casual words. The suspense grew stronger when, a few days later, the director arranged a dinner for the cast. The room was filled with laughter and music. Most people shared stories of fame, awards, and travels. But when it came to Keanu, he simply listened, smiling, rarely speaking. Anna decided to test something. Instead of telling a glamorous story, she shared something raw. She told the group about her childhood in Cuba, about standing in long lines for food, about the nights when she would look at the sky and dream of being part of a world she could barely imagine. Her voice trembled at first, but then grew steady. The room grew quiet. Some people looked uncomfortable, others impressed. But Keanu's reaction was different. He didn't clap, he didn't shower her with praise. Instead, he leaned forward, his eyes soft, and said, "You carried hope when the world gave you none." That's strength, Anna's heart raced. It wasn't the words alone. It was the way he said them, as if he understood the loneliness behind her story. She realized she had reached a small corner of his guarded world. But the twist came soon after. As the dinner ended and people began leaving, Anna thought Keanu might finally open up more to her. Instead, he quietly slipped out of the room without saying goodbye. She followed him outside and found him sitting on the steps, looking up at the night sky. "Why do you always leave so suddenly?" she asked softly. He turned to her, his expression calm but distant. "Because sometimes silence says more than words." His answer left her speechless. Part of her felt rejected, but another part sensed there was something deeper he wasn't ready to reveal. As she walked back to her car that night, a thought grew inside her. If she truly wanted his attention, she couldn't force it. She would need patience, resilience, and the courage to face the truth when it came. What she did not know was that Keanu had already noticed her more than she realized. He saw the honesty in her story, the resilience in her eyes. But his silence was not because he didn't care. It was because he feared what caring might bring. The quiet test between them had only begun. The storm, beneath the silence the following weeks, brought more chances for Anna and Keanu to cross paths. Their film schedule demanded long hours together, yet it always felt like there was an invisible space between them. Anna tried not to push too hard, remembering his words about silence. Still, her heart kept asking, what is he hiding behind that quiet shield? One morning, while waiting on set, Anna overheard two crew members whispering about Keanu. They spoke of tragedies from his past, the kind that left scars no fame could heal. Anna froze as she listened. They mentioned the loss of people he had loved, how he lived through heartbreaks that would have broken most men. Suddenly, everything about his silence began to make sense. He wasn't distant because he didn't care. He was distant because caring too much had once hurt him deeply. That night, Anna lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She thought about her own struggles, the times she had felt alone in a foreign country, chasing dreams while carrying the weight of expectations. She realized they were not as different as she had believed. Keanu's silence wasn't a wall to keep people out. It was a door that required respect to open. The twist came during a late-night rehearsal. A sudden rainstorm swept through the outdoor set, drenching everyone before they could reach cover. Most people ran, laughing, shouting, trying to stay dry. But Anna noticed Keanu wasn't rushing. He was helping the crew move heavy equipment out of the rain. Without thinking, she ran back to help him. Their clothes were soaked, their hands freezing. But they worked side by side until the last piece was safe. When the chaos settled, they stood together under a thin metal roof, dripping and breathless. Anna laughed softly, brushing her wet hair from her face. "You could have just left with everyone else," she said. Keanu shook his head, his eyes calm as always. "You don't leave when people need you. That's the rule I live by." Those words struck her harder than the cold rain. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the truth. He wasn't hiding because he didn't want to be seen. He was hiding because he wanted the world to see others before him. Anna's heart ached with respect. "You carry so much, Keanu." "But who carries you?" For the first time, his eyes shifted away, and a shadow crossed his face. "No one needs to," he whispered. "I've learned to carry myself." Suspense filled the air. Anna wanted to tell him he didn't always have to carry everything alone, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, they stood in silence, listening to the rain. In the days that followed, Anna began to change. She stopped trying to grab his attention with big gestures. Instead, she showed up in small ways. She brought extra coffee for the crew because she had seen him do the same. She helped an assistant fix props without telling anyone. She carried herself with quiet resilience, not for recognition, but because she realized this was the way Keanu lived, through kindness without spotlight. Keanu noticed. Though he never said much, his eyes softened when he saw her actions. One evening, as they walked off set together, he finally spoke. "You remind me of someone I used to know," he said quietly. Anna's breath caught. "Someone important?" He nodded but said no more. The weight of his silence was louder than any story. That night, Anna understood something. His silence was not rejection. It was trust waiting to be earned. And if she was patient enough, one day that trust might reveal the storm he carried inside. But what neither of them expected was how that storm would break open. Not in private, but in front of the world, shocking everyone who believed they already knew Keanu Reeves. When the mask slipped, the storm that Anna had felt in her heart finally began to show its first signs on a quiet Saturday evening. The cast and crew had gathered for a press event. The hall was filled with flashing cameras, reporters shouting questions, and fans cheering from behind the barriers. Keanu, as always, carried himself with quiet grace. He smiled politely, answered with respect, and never once tried to make the spotlight his own. Anna watched him from a distance. Part of her longed to step closer, but she also felt nervous. She had begun to understand him better, but she still hadn't found the courage to break through his silence. The twist came when a reporter, eager for attention, asked a cruel question. Instead of asking about the film, the reporter shouted, "Keanu, people say you hide because you're broken. Is that true? Are you too damaged to let anyone close?" The room froze. Cameras clicked, microphones pushed forward, and everyone waited. Anna's heart pounded. She expected Keanu to walk away, as he usually did when faced with painful words. But this time, something shifted. Keanu lowered his head for a long moment. When he finally looked up, his eyes carried the weight of years. His voice was calm, but each word carried power. "I don't hide because I'm broken. I live quietly because kindness doesn't need an audience. I don't have to prove my pain, and I don't have to prove my love. I only have to live it." The hall fell silent. Even the reporter who had asked the question looked stunned. Anna felt tears press against her eyes. She had never heard him speak so openly, so unguarded. For a moment, the mask of silence slipped, and the man beneath was revealed. As the event ended, Keanu quietly stepped outside. Anna followed him, her heart racing. She found him leaning against a wall, looking out at the city lights. His shoulders seemed heavier than before. She stood beside him, unsure what to say. Finally, she whispered, "You didn't have to answer that question. But I'm glad you did." He gave a small smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Sometimes silence is strength. Sometimes words are. Tonight, words had to be enough. Anna wanted to reach out, to tell him that he didn't have to carry everything alone, but she held back. She sensed he wasn't ready. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that he had let her see a part of himself no one else had. In the days that followed, the internet exploded with clips of his response. Fans praised his humility, his strength, his wisdom. Headlines called it the most honest moment in Hollywood. But for Anna, it wasn't about the headlines. It was about the man she had seen when the cameras turned away. A man who had carried storms inside him and still chose kindness every single day. One evening, as filming wrapped, Anna found herself walking beside him. The set was quiet. Most people already gone. She gathered her courage and said softly, "You don't always have to be strong, you know." Keanu looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then, after a long pause, he said, "Maybe one day I'll believe that. Maybe one day I'll let someone else carry the silence with me." Her heart skipped. It was the closest he had ever come to opening the door fully. But it was also a warning. If she wanted to step inside his world, she would have to prove she could handle the weight. What Anna didn't know was that the real test was waiting just around the corner. A moment was coming that would shake both of them, forcing Keanu to face the past he had kept hidden, and forcing Anna to choose whether her admiration was strong enough to withstand the truth. The weight of truth. The storm that had been building finally began to break during the final week of filming. The cast and crew were exhausted, everyone running on little sleep, but there was a strange energy in the air. Whispers traveled across the set. Rumors that someone from Keanu's past had appeared. Someone who carried a story the world had never heard. Anna felt the tension before she even saw him. An older man, dressed simply, walked onto the set one evening. He wasn't part of the crew, but the moment Keanu noticed him, his entire body stilled. The calm, steady man that Anna had come to know seemed shaken for the first time. The crew didn't understand what was happening, but Anna could feel it. This man held a piece of Keanu's past. The man stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "You don't change, Keanu. You're still the one who hides behind silence." Anna's heart pounded. She had never seen Keanu look so vulnerable. He lowered his head, his hands tightening into fists before he relaxed them again. "Not here," Keanu whispered. "Not in front of everyone." But it was too late. The crew had gone quiet, eyes fixed on the two men. The air was heavy with suspense. The man's words came like sharp blades. "People think you're kind because you're quiet. They don't know the truth. They don't know how much you've lost." Maybe it's time they did. Anna's chest tightened. She wanted to step forward to defend him, but something inside told her this was not her battle to fight. This was Keanu's storm, and he had to face it. After a long pause, Keanu spoke, his voice softer than anyone expected. "The truth is not a weapon. It's a weight, and I choose to carry it without making others bleed." The man shook his head, but before he could respond, Anna finally stepped in. "Enough," she said, her voice steady. "Whatever his past is, it belongs to him. You don't get to decide when he shares it." The silence that followed was sharp. Keanu looked at her, his eyes unreadable, but there was something in them she hadn't seen before. Gratitude and maybe even trust. The man eventually left, his footsteps fading into the distance. But the damage lingered. Questions swirled among the crew, and the weight on Keanu's shoulders grew heavier. Among the crew, and the weight on Keanu's shoulders grew heavier. Later that night, Anna found him sitting alone on a quiet bench near the set. The city lights glowed faintly in the distance, and the hum of traffic was the only sound. She sat beside him, careful not to break the fragile quiet. After a long time, Keanu finally spoke. "He's from my past. Someone who knew me when life looked very different." "He's not wrong. I've lost more than I can say. But I don't want the world to know those details. I don't want my pain to become a story people use for headlines." Anna's heart ached. "Then don't share it with the world," she said gently. "Share it with someone who won't use it against you." He turned to her, his eyes searching hers. For a moment, it felt like the silence between them was no longer a wall, but a fragile bridge. "You don't know how heavy it is," he whispered. "Then let me carry a little of it," she replied. Her voice trembled, but her eyes stayed steady. "You don't have to give me everything, just don't carry it all alone." The suspense hung in the air as Keanu studied her, his expression unreadable. Then, for the first time, he opened his notebook. the one he always guarded so carefully. He placed it gently in her hands. "These are the names of people I've met," he said softly. "People who showed me kindness. People I tried to help in return. I write them down so I never forget, because the world forgets too easily." Anna's hand shook as she held the notebook. She realized it wasn't just pages of names. It was his heart, his history, his way of carrying love and loss in silence. A tear slid down her cheek. "Keanu, this isn't brokenness. This is strength, and it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Keanu lowered his head, his shoulders trembling. He didn't cry, but Anna knew in that moment that he was closer to breaking the silence than ever before. But what neither of them expected was that the storm was far from over. The man from his past hadn't left for good. He had plans that would drag Keanu's truth into the open, whether he wanted it or not. When silence turned into light, the storm broke without warning. The man from Keanu's past returned, not in private, but in front of cameras, reporters, and flashing lights. He revealed fragments of Keanu's story. His losses, his grief, the quiet struggles he had tried to protect. The headlines spread fast, twisting his pain into entertainment. Anna watched in horror as the world consumed his silence. Articles painted him as the loneliest man in Hollywood. Talk shows turned his tragedy into jokes. Strangers who had never met him spoke as if they knew his heart. Keanu did not defend himself. He walked calmly through airports, smiled politely at fans, and answered no questions. But Anna could see the weight pressing harder on him. His shoulders seemed heavier, his eyes more distant. One evening, when the noise outside was at its loudest, Anna found him sitting alone in the studio garden. The night air was cool, and the sound of crickets filled the silence. He held the small notebook in his hands, turning its worn pages slowly. She sat beside him, her voice soft. "They don't deserve to know your story like this." He looked up at the stars, his face calm but tired. "The world will always take stories and twist them. But kindness doesn't need protection. It shines even when people misunderstand it." Anna's heart ached. She had never met someone who carried so much pain, yet still spoke with such humility. "You don't have to face this alone anymore," she whispered. "Let me stand beside you." Not as a headline, not as a rumor, just as someone who sees you. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he placed the notebook in her lap again. "If you want to stand beside me, then carry this with me. Every name in here is a reminder that even when I lost everything, kindness was still real." "That's what I choose to remember." Tears filled her eyes as she traced the ink on the page. "Then let's carry it together," she said firmly. The next day brought the unexpected twist. Instead of hiding, Keanu walked into the press conference arranged for the film. Cameras flashed, questions fired, but this time he did not stay silent. His voice was steady, his presence calm. "People talk about what I've lost, but that's not my story. My story is about what I've received. I've seen kindness from strangers, from friends, from people who gave when they had nothing. If the world wants to know who I am, then know this. I believe kindness is stronger than pain. And that's the only story I'll ever share." The room went silent. Reporters who had expected gossip were left speechless. The clip went viral within hours, but not because it was scandal. It was because it was hope. People everywhere shared his words, calling it the moment silence turned into light. Anna stood backstage, watching him with tears in her eyes. She realized then that she had never needed to win his attention. She had needed only to respect the silence, to understand the storm, and to walk with him until he was ready to let light through. When he stepped off stage, he looked at her. For the first time, there was no distance in his eyes, only trust, only peace. "Thank you," he whispered. She shook her head gently. "You don't have to thank me. You just have to keep being you." The world saw a man who shocked everyone with his response. But Anna saw something greater. The quiet resilience of a soul that chose kindness over bitterness, silence over noise, and love over loss, the final choice after the press conference. Life changed in ways neither Anna nor Keanu had expected. The world no longer called him the loneliest man in Hollywood. Instead, people began to speak of him as a symbol of strength and kindness. Strangers wrote letters, fans left flowers, and online communities shared their own stories of loss and resilience, inspired by his words. But for Keanu, the real change was quieter. He no longer carried his notebook alone. Anna was there beside him, helping him remember the names not as burdens but as blessings. She listened when he spoke. She stayed silent when silence was enough. And she showed him through her presence that attention was never her true goal. It was connection. The film eventually wrapped, and on the last day of shooting, the crew gathered for one final dinner. Laughter and stories filled the room. But when it was Keanu's turn to speak, he stood slowly, his notebook in hand. "This book," he said, holding it gently, "has always been my way of remembering the kindness I've seen in my life. I used to believe it was something I had to carry alone, but I've learned that kindness grows when it's shared. So tonight, I want to share it." He opened the notebook and began to read names aloud. Crew members, assistants, even security guards who had done small acts of kindness during the shoot. One by one, he honored them, reminding everyone that no gesture was too small to matter. The room grew emotional, people wiping tears, clapping softly. When he finished, he closed the notebook and placed it in Anna's hands. "This doesn't belong only to me anymore," he said quietly. "It belongs to everyone who believes in kindness." Anna's eyes filled with tears. She understood the depth of the gesture. He wasn't just trusting her, he was inviting her into the heart of his world. The twist came after the dinner. As they stepped outside into the cool night, reporters were waiting, cameras flashing. One called out, "Anna, after everything, did you finally get Keanu's attention?" The crowd held its breath, waiting for her answer. Anna smiled softly, glancing at Keanu before looking back at the reporters. "I didn't need his attention," she said. "I found his respect, and that is worth far more." Keanu, who rarely showed emotion in public, turned to her with a look that silenced the crowd. In that moment, his quiet respect spoke louder than any declaration. From that day forward, their story was no longer about one woman trying to catch a man's attention. It was about two people who found a way to carry silence together, transforming it into something the world desperately needed: hope. The headlines shifted. They no longer asked about his pain. Instead, they spoke of his message: kindness over noise, humility over pride, resilience over despair. And for Anna, what began as a journey to understand him became a journey to understand herself. She learned that love, respect, and kindness are not about loud gestures or dramatic moments. They are about standing beside someone, even in silence, and choosing to stay. Keanu once said, "Sometimes silence says more than words." But now, with Anna by his side, his silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. It was shared. The story ended not with a shocking confession or a dramatic scene, but with something far more powerful. Two hearts walking quietly together, carrying the weight of the past and turning it into light for the future.